Good afternoon, everyone. So it appears that we have audio. I can hear it coming through, so that's good. It's always a good start to a stream. Right, folks, let me just get a few things organized and we will start very shortly. All right, folks, we'll give people a couple of minutes to find their way in before we start doing anything. Haven't done any kind of warm up today. It's been a busy day of non-sculpting, so that'll do. All right, folks. So we seem to have a few more people kind of joining the stream. So welcome back to what's this? Yulio. Hey, Yulio. Welcome back to the stream. Yes. So we are going to be creating a Bintourong. This is also known as a Bearcat, and this is going to continue our series on the A to Z of Zbrush. And in this series, we're going to be creating mostly creatures, both real and imagined. So we might make a cryptid one session, and then maybe make something far more realistic the next. You know, an animal that everyone knows, and hopefully maybe introduce people to some creatures and animals that you're not aware of. All right, and different ways for us to approach creating them. All right. So, if you're not aware of what a binturong looks like, I was able to find a royalty-free image of one of these, and I want to stress the royalty freeness of this. Okay, so this is from Pixabay, and the username is Sparkling Girl. If you want to go and check out this image for yourself, it's completely free to use for both commercial and personal projects. All right, so this is just to give everyone a better idea of what the creature looks like that we're going to be making. All right, or we're going to attempt to make, shall I say? All right, so before we kind of actually start creating this, I do of course want to bring up our last project. So I'm going to bring in the aardvark from last week. And here he is. This is Arnold, our aardvark. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that the body of the aardvark and Bearcat are quite similar. So we will be looking at how to approach building the body, but we're probably going to focus more on the limbs and the head. Okay, so we're going to focus on how we're going to build up the face and specifically how we build up the feet, because the feet are very, very different. All right. Now, with that in mind, let's get started. So, when we created the aardvark, we used Z-spheres, and for anyone who's new to the stream, who hasn't been here before, if you go into the lightbox inside of Zbrush and go along to the ZZoo folder here, in there you're going to find a whole bunch of Z-tools and Z-projects of different animal types, all made up using Z-spheres. Okay, and it's a really, really useful way to get started, and there's a whole host of different animals in there. Loads of them. And you might think, well, why are we not using one of these? Because generally, it's a really good idea to learn how to do this from scratch whenever you possibly can. These are great shortcuts, but it's a really good idea to learn how to do this from scratch. And for our Bintourong here, we're going to do the exact same thing as we did with our aardvark. We're going to start with Z-spheres, but we're also going to be looking more into using primitives to block out different elements such as the head and the feet. All right, so we'll start off with our Z-spheres. We're going to go into the tool palette and we're going to click on Z-sphere. I'm going to clear off, I'm actually just going to move my pure ref to the side here. Again, you won't be able to see my pure ref, but there is reference here, and I was actually able to find more skeleton reference for this Bintourong than the aardvark, which was quite surprising to me. Oh, hi CC, thanks for coming in. So yeah, so let's get started with our Bearcat. So we're going to drag out a Z-sphere, tap T to go into the edit mode. Oh, oops, there we go. Bit of an issue there. And I'm going to make sure that I have symmetry on. So I'm just going to tap X, and I can see that I have symmetry because I'm able to draw out more Z-spheres. Now, using Z-spheres is just my general preference when it comes to creating animals and just creatures and characters from scratch in ZBrush by default. It just allows me to plan out the creature a little bit easier. So again, we're dealing with a very similar structure to the aardvark in some ways, but one thing that is always a really good thing to look at is comparative anatomy. Look at how similar creatures actually are, particularly if they're vertebrates. So all I'm going to do here is start to kind of build out the rib cage here. So this area here is the rib cage. Got the spine over here, and then this is going to be our hips. And if you've never used Z-spheres before, all I'm doing is using the draw tool here, and as I hover over my mesh, I can click and drag out a new Z-sphere. Then I can use the move, translate, and rotate tools to kind of readjust and position those. So for example, I'm going to draw out a new Z-sphere here, and this is going to be kind of essentially where the scapula would be. Then I'm going to drag another one out and then pull it back like so, and then just pull it out. Okay, kind of scaling as I go. I'm going to draw out another one and bring that forward. So it's important to know that for this here, I'm not actually expecting those to be... Actually, do you know what? We're probably overcomplicating this. Let's just delete those. There we go. Again, haven't had a chance to warm up today, folks, so might be a bit rusty to begin with. So I'm going to scale out where I want the ribcage to go. And then using the draw tool again, I can simply tap to add in another couple of Z-spheres as needed, just to kind of indicate where the spine's going to go. There we go. Then we need to add in the neck. So, how are we doing? Oh, we don't have a lot of people today. Not a lot of people in today. So we're going to scale down, we're going to scale up the head a little bit. And for this here, I just want to give myself a rough indication of where the head is. I don't want to kind of go as far as we did with the aardvark. I just want to get a rough shape here because we're going to go through and look at this in a more detailed way in a second. There we go. And if you want to remove a Z-sphere from your selection here, we just have to make sure that we're in the draw mode, hold down Alt and tap, and then that will get rid of it. Add in the tail. This time I'm going to pull the tail all the way out and just kind of make it a little bit straighter. Go back in and then try to kind of balance out where I want the rest of these to go. And then scale them down. All right. So how's everyone doing? I hope everyone is having a good start to their week. Mine has been busy, and I hope everyone else's has been as well. But good busy, I hope. All right. So continuing on with our Z-shears, we're going to draw out where we want our rear hips to go. Then from there, got our rear leg bones. So anyone that was here last week, you can see the similarities in the process that I'm using here. And that's something that's really important, is that unless you want to learn a new technique, the way that you will get faster at your own work is repetition. So finding something that works for you and a workflow that you can work quickly in is really important. And it doesn't have to be one that you find online. It can be one you've adapted or one that you've just found yourself. Now, it's always a good idea to obviously learn from those already working in the field, because that will speed up that's going to speed up your entire learning process as well. It gives you a head start. So I'm going to bring these down a little bit, raise up the leg. And as I said, I found a really good image of a Bintourong skeleton. So that's what I'm currently working with. There we go. It's looking a bit like a dinosaur at the moment, but don't worry, it will look better soon. It will look better soon, trust me. So I'm going to pop out where I want the shoulder to be. Again, same as we did with the rear legs. We'll add in another Z-sphere to act as our front limbs. Again, just getting them into place first, and then you can readjust and reposition. So don't feel as though you've got to kind of nail the look of it straight away. And again, similar to the way that we did the aardvark, we're not going to worry at all much about the paws here. We just need them roughly in place. And then we'll take it from there. So I'm just going to jump into my actual reference again here. B for Binosaur. Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So Binturongs are really, really strange looking creatures. I absolutely love them. They're known as what is it? They've got a special classification. They are a mammal, but I can't remember exactly what the classification is. I think it begins with a V, but essentially it translates into feline, feline style mammals. Okay, um, that's my understanding anyway. And they're tree dwellers, and they like to crawl on things. There we go. That's a decent image of them. Get an idea of how much we need to. There we go. Now I'm going to start bringing the tail down. So that I can make sure that I'm getting the length right. Okay. Same as we did before, we're going to go into our subtool. We're going to append not a cylinder. I don't want that. What I would like is a cube, please. And we're just going to knock this out. Now, even though we're using a similar technique to begin with that we did with the aardvark, I still want to try and showcase a lot of different techniques, or as many different techniques of creating in ZBrush as possible. That's another goal of this series, is to try and showcase different ways you can work, because you don't have to work the way everyone else does. I've said this before, it's about it's the outcome that really matters. As long as you're not spending excessive amounts of time and wasting time, as I said, the actual approach doesn't really matter that much, particularly when it comes to the sculpting. When it comes to the more technical side of 3D, yes, I would agree that how it's done is important. But there we go. We're probably going to have to do some changes here. How's that looking? I wish I could show you the reference I'm using, because I know that just having this one image up is probably a little bit, you're probably thinking that doesn't look anything like it, but they've got quite a lot of fur on them. This is definitely, they're quite furry creatures. So how we're going to approach that here is going to be interesting, because I haven't thought that far ahead, folks. I'm not going to lie, haven't thought that far ahead. But that's again why that was kind of another goal of this series. I don't want to kind of come in like fully prepped or planned, just see how we go. But we don't have a lot of viewers today, which is unfortunate, but you can't win them all. Say that 10 times in a row quick. Not a chance, CC. There's no way there's no way I could do that. I can barely speak at the best of times. I am Scottish after all. So all right. So as always, folks, if there is anything that you are curious about the way that we're doing things, or if you want to ask any questions, feel free to do so. I'm more than happy to to slow everything down and go through things step by step, if it will help people's understanding of what it is we're making. So the great thing again as well, I've got this great image of a Bintourong, and it's kind of it's eating out of a coconut that's hanging, I assume in a zoo, and it is just it's the funniest looking little thing. So we're going to pop in there we go. That's better. That's a little bit better looking. And just to help me for the time being, I can maybe just pop in a couple more of these for his ears. Like so. And something you can do with Z-spheres, which I don't know if I would recommend that often, is if you were to put a couple of Z-spheres here for, say for example, for eyes, right? You can take the move brush and kind of, or the move tool, and do something like this, and move them into the surface, right? And then when you tap A, oh god, look at that, that's horrific. That's horrific. Occasionally, you will actually create some edge looping if you wanted to, but it's really not necessary. I just wanted to kind of showcase that there. But yeah, we're going to redo his face. I think that was a little bit. That was a bit scary. I won't lie. There we go. That's a bit better. There we go. All right. Do a little bit more scaling here at the back, just to plump out the rear limbs. And as for the overall scale of the creature, I'm going to fix that once we transfer it over from our Z-spheres. Okay, so Z-sphere's done, so we're going to save. I know, really unlike me to save this early on, folks, but we are where we are. And I'm hoping to... I was kind of hoping that we might be able to get through this in one session, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we'll get through this in one session or not. So we have created our Z-sphere. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate the Z-sphere. And I'm going to pop that in a folder and just call it Stages. And I'll rename it Stage 1. Actually, I need to do a little bit of housekeeping here and resave, because my character's, the base for my character wasn't actually in the right place. Wasn't at the top of my subtool list, so the naming convention has become a little bit skewed. There we go. So now that that's done, I'm going to go into my adaptive skin, turn on preview. We're going to lower our Dynamesh resolution and remove that, because I don't want that. I don't want the Dynamesh to kind of affect it. I'd rather just work with the polygons at this stage. And I can choose here as well my density. Now don't worry, if you choose level 2 density, don't worry about that. If you then think, oh actually, I really wish I'd went lower, that's fine. If you apply a level 2 density, it's just going to give you subdivisions, okay, that you can step up and down as you need to. So I'm going to put it to 1 because I actually think that's more than enough for the time being. And then hit Make Adaptive Skin. And when you do that, ZBrush will copy that and pop it into your subtool list. So I'll have to go in and choose Append and choose Skin Bearcat _00. And there we go. So I'm going to call this Polygon, or just Poly for short. And I'll just rename this Z-sphere. Really important to do that, actually, particularly if you're a beginner in ZBrush. Actually, beginner in anything really, you know. Empress Tiramisu. Well, other than that being a fantastic name, this is a Bintourong, also commonly known as a Bearcat. I absolutely love them. They're like little werewolves, and they just climb on people, and they're very docile. So I kind of love these little guys. So this is what we're making. We're going to be making a Bearcat. How big is that actually? That's maybe a little bit large. I don't want it to completely take over everything. And this is where we started. So, how are we doing? Still a few people. Actually, let me just open up I'm just going to open up the YouTube for Firestorm here, folks, just so you can see if we've got anybody on the YouTube side. We might have a few more viewers. We don't. Okay. Quiet. It's a quiet start to the week. Christmas is, oh my, it's so cute. Yes, I would recommend anyone watching, do a search for a Bearcat, particularly a baby one, and it'll complete your day. So, same as we did before with our, with the aardvark. We're going to start blocking out and just reshaping the forms. Just using the move brush and the smooth brush. And I can either use my standard move, or my move topological. Generally, when I'm at this low resolution, I will use the move topological. And there we go. Just the ears also could be completely in the wrong place, folks. I'm well aware of that. I might have to get rid of them, but as I'm not planning on working the head up in this way, I'm actually going to show you a different approach for doing the head and the feet once we block out our character's overall forms in the body. So grab the inflate brush, because what I think I'm going to do here is, they do have quite furry bodies, but at the same time it's very dense. It's very densely packed onto them. So we might just go with some sculpted fur here. So we're just going to get the forms in the right place. But as I said, I hope everyone is having a good start to their week. And again, see, I do this a lot with my, when I'm using Z-spheres, I tend to make the feet really long, and they really don't need to be, and it can throw things off a little bit. So let's just shorten those, because their feet are great. Definitely in the running for one of my favorite animals. I need a comprehensive list. Oh, that would be quite difficult. I'm not going to lie. I enjoy animals. I really do. Animals are just, they're just, it's hard to explain really. I just find animals fascinating. And I'm pretty sure if I hadn't gotten into the CG industry, that I'd probably have ended up doing a job somewhat related to animals, well, whether it be animal welfare or, you know, or kind of handling or anything like that, really. You know, a vet. I mean, recently, twice now I've applied to Edinburgh Zoo in Scotland for the animal handler positions that they've been posting, with absolutely zero experience as an animal handler. I just went for it, And if I'm being honest, that's a good way to be. Just go for it. There's a job you want, folks. Just really I think, you know, from I think maybe 10 years ago, I would say, no, 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 don't, really be really picky about what jobs. Nowadays, no, go for whatever you want. Just go for it. You never know. What's this? For mention of the aardvark and seeing this, I'm guessing you specialize in creature animal sculpting. It's one of my specialisms, tiramisu. Yes, it is. I actually rarely get to do it in the industry, but I sculpt. I do enjoy sculpting animals, and creatures and characters. But yes, my specialisms would be kind of characters and creatures. But because I rarely get a chance to do creatures, that's why I wanted to do an A to Z list basically for this Firestorm series. Okay, so you can see already, and I'm hoping that everyone has been able to find a picture of a Bintourong online so they can follow along. On my personal stream, where I stream Wednesdays over on Twitch at 7 o'clock UK time, I'm more lax about the stuff I show because that's my personal stream. But the reason I'm not showing any reference images is just for copyright reasons, folks. Okay, because we don't want Firestorm getting a strike because I decided to put up a copyrighted image. Okay, yeah, that's... Also, do a search for Binturongs or Bearcats with their tongues out. That in itself is just awesome. So you can see how low resolution that we're working with. And honestly, they're kind of like raccoons. They've got a bit of a raccoon look to them as well, but they're just completely black with black and with these like speckly white fur. They're great. And then the other great thing as well is that they have these obviously little bear-like ears, and then they have this random tuft. They're kind of like old men in many ways. So if I go into my insert mesh primitive brush here, and I'm going to pick out a standard polysphere, and I'm just going to drag this out at the back. I'm going to add in the tuft. Now, if you've never used the IMM brushes before, I can show you a couple of tips with these. So you can see that as I draw this out, I can, if I move my stylus left and right, I can actually affect how thin it is. So you can create an elongated sphere if needs be. Another thing that you can do with when you're kind of drawing out one of these is if you click, drag, and then tap Control or hold Control, what ZBrush will do is, depending on the size of your brush, it will draw out your mesh to that size and it will snap it to that size. So if you know you want to get a specific size on your mesh, you can simply set your brush diameter, tap Control, and it will put it into place. All right. So I'm just going to free it there, going to free ball it there, and then because again this is just our proxy mesh, and there we go. So they've got these little tufty bits that come out the back like so from their ears, and I just love it. It just adds to their whole silhouette. All right, so we've actually got they're quite quick here than we did last time. What's this? The tuft seems so random. Yes, the tufts are very random. It doesn't. It looks like somebody's actually painted them on or just glued them onto the back of their heads. It's like somebody gave them a haircut and forgot those parts of it. You're giving me more homework than when you actually taught me, but I can't say that I'm mad about it. Thank you, Cece. Yeah. I never really believed in homework when I was, when I teach. I don't actually believe in homework either. There you go. There's a random thing, folks. I'm sure Firestorm will be happy I'm talking about that rather than 3D. But I truly believe that homework is pointless from schools. I don't see the point. Um, you know, kids are at school most of the day and then they're given more work when they go home. Why? It's just, I think it can generate resentment, and I don't really see it as a very productive thing that schools should do, personally. Okay, let's see where our floor is. Excellent. But 3D homework's okay because it's 3D. So there we go. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, I think I've managed to get the legs and the limbs at the right sizes. Pretty close. Although one thing I have not really... I need to straighten out the back. There we go. They've got a little bit of a raised part here, but then the rest of it, the back is pretty straight until it gets to the neck. And then there's this really great feature. I love the fact that the neck and the head just merge into each other. They just merge into each other. And let's just thicken the neck up a bit as well. Do a quick smooth. And again, we don't have a lot of topology here. This is really, really low poly. But it's very helpful. It really is, folks. I cannot stress how useful it is to work at low resolutions, because you're not able to add any details. It's one of the reasons I teach this way, is that if you can't add a detail, then you're forced to focus more on the forms of the object that you're trying to create. And there is obviously, it gets to a point where you cannot go any further. But as something I mentioned when we were building the aardvark, is I tend to stay at this low poly stage for a very, very long time, until I'm really confident that I've gotten as close as I can to the forms that I want, for the forms to match. That's pretty good. But something I have noticed is, and this is more to do with our fur, is that, oh, we have a follower. Thank you very much for the follow. I'm not used to that follow sound, so it basically frightens me every single time. It just it startles me every time. So let's just widen out the forearm here, the forearm section. There we go. Yeah, that's looking better. Invert that mask, and we'll just inflate the inner part too. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're 40 minutes in, folks. We've done a lot of yammering, or I have, but we have our Bearcat. I'm quite. Ooh, oh no, nope. See, I was about to say let's move up and let's move on to something else, and then I noticed something that I didn't like, and I need to add a bit more volume to these front legs, or these rear legs, sorry, at the front. And there we go. Cat bear. Indeed. Also, folks, you know, we need to come up with a name for our Bintourong. The aardvark was named Arnold. It doesn't have to begin with B. You know, you can come up with another name if you wish, but if anyone wants to suggest a name, you can join the Firestorm Discord as well. There is a public Discord for Firestorm, so please do go ahead and follow that. We've got a lot of great people in there. A lot of great people. And also keep an eye on the socials in general for Firestorm, because we have a lot of other streamers coming up as well that you're not going to want to miss. You're not going to want to miss. Okay. Right. Okay, we're going to risk it for a biscuit, folks, and we're going to save, and we're going to move on. We're going to move on. Ah, interesting. Benji the Bearcat. Jimbo too. Benji, Benji the Bearcat. I like that. That's good. Interesting. Why has Zbrush done that? Smooth. That's why. Okay. Here's a little tip, folks, in case you're curious. So for example, if you are smoothing or subdividing a mesh in Zbrush, so if I hit Control D, or if I go across to the tool palette and hit divide, you'll see that it adds one level of subdivision. And generally what that means is it's going to take whatever poly count you have and multiply it by 4 and give you something that looks like this. You can see instantly as well, this is something I want to point out. You can see instantly how when you subdivide, your forms should all still look good. That's your kind of goal. You don't want to smooth it and everything look a little bit rubbish. Now, it's going to shrink, and that's just the nature of how ZBrush works. But if you don't want that to happen, if you create yourself a morph target, if I can find the menu, there we go. So I'm going to hit store MT. I'm going to subdivide. And then once I've subdivided it once, I'm going to move back down my subdivisions. And in the morph target, I'm going to choose switch. And you'll see the difference in size here. So when we add a subdivision, you can see how much volume of our creature that we lose. And this is a really important thing. I cannot stress that, because if you are in a, particularly in games, if your silhouette or the volume of your character changes when you start to add details like this, and it's the same actually pretty much in any industry, you don't want to lose all the form, the volume, and the size, because for example, this larger mesh is maybe what the texture artists or the riggers are working with, and then when you finish your model, you send them something that's a lot smaller, less volume, and it's going to cause some problems. Wow, we've jumped up to 53 people. When did that happen? Hi everyone. I'm just having a small rant about the making sure that you don't lose volume in your sculpt and how to kind of avoid it in ZBrush using a morph target. Okay, so we can hit the switch and then tap the D key to go up a subdivision level, delete that, and store the morph target again. So now when I switch between my subdivisions, there's no shrinkage and all the forms are in place. Okay. All right, folks. So welcome everyone to the next session in our A to Z of ZBrush here at Firestorm. We are currently working on putting together a Bintourong or a Bearcat. These are awesome little werewolf-looking tree-dwelling creatures, and I've wanted to make one for quite a long time. Now, anyone who caught the last stream where we created our aardvark, let's bring him in here. This is what we created at our last session, Arnold the aardvark. We've used a very similar approach. we've started off with a Z-sphere skeleton, so I can show you how that looks here. So we started off with our Z-spheres, we converted it into polygons, and then we adjusted the forms and reshaped it to get something that looks like this. Now, unlike with the aardvark, where we continued on and we just sculpted straight into this mesh here, we're going to approach things in a slightly different way, just to give everyone a different approach for creating parts of their creatures or their characters. And we're going to be using primitive block out here, all right? And what I mean by that is, let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this poly here, or this poly mesh. I'm going to delete the lower, and then I'm going to get rid of the body because I only want to work on the head here, all right? So let's turn on double so we can see what we're doing. Let's get rid of the tufts at the back of the hair. So we'll keep some of the neck as well, all right? So I'll do a delete hidden. And then that gives me this to work with. So from here, we can do one of two things. We can either start rebuilding this and start to add some primitives and some different shapes, or we can actually start working on top of this using the insert mesh brushes. And that's the approach I would like to take today, okay? But there's nothing stopping you from starting this completely from scratch. Actually, do you know what? No, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. So, actually, do you know what, folks? I think I know what I'm going to do here. I'm going to move this off to the side. I'm going to duplicate it, move it off to the side. And then I'm going to append in a sphere. There we go. I'm going to append in a sphere and turn that into I'm going to go into the initialize menu and we're going to turn on Q sphere. I'm going to center that and bring it forward. And I'm going to show you how to block out the head using primitives as opposed to using Z-spheres. So we're going to try and recreate this head on the right here, but we're going to use primitives instead. So I have my Z-sphere, so I'm going to hit Control D to add a subdivision. I'm going to try and get that into the right shape. Now, obviously I could grab the move brush and I could start manipulating the shape of the head, but I don't want to do that. I want to give myself a little bit more control here. So I'm going to go into the brush menu and I'm going to choose the IMM primitives brush. In here, this is going to give me a selection of different shapes that I can apply onto my model, and then I can reshape them as I go to kind of create the rest of my character or my creature. So which shape you choose is entirely up to yourself. Generally, I will be sticking to polyspheres and probably the capsules as well. So let's grab this polysphere. I'm going to drag... okay, this is a good lesson. The mesh is composed of multiple subdivisions. So I'm going to have to go into geometry and delete my lower. And now I'll be able to draw onto this mesh. So what I'm going to do is, if I have symmetry on, it will allow me to draw out one on either side, but I don't want that. I want one in the middle. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hold down Control. And if I hold down Control while I'm creating and inserting this mesh, ZBrush will snap it to the size of my brush. There we go. So once that's in place, I can now start to refine it. And we can use the scale tools to bring this out. And now I can start using the move brush to start shaping this. So I'm going to be using this reference here, and I've also got other reference on my pure ref here that you won't be able to see. I'm going to use this to block out my character. And the reason that this is actually a really interesting and useful approach to building out your character is that you can go as detailed or as simplistic as you want. Okay? It allows you to break up these forms. So as you're looking at this creature, I'm looking at it going, right, so I've got my eye socket here, I've got the bridge of the nose, I've got the actual nose itself, the upper and lower jaw, and I could also break out this section of fur, which isn't going to be necessarily a hard part of the creature. It's not going to be part of the skull or the flesh, but it is a shape that I will have to create. Same goes for the ears, okay? And we could even break it down even further, and we can look at things like the upper lid, the lower lid, and then some of the kind of fleshier, fatty tissue kind of above the brow, that type of thing, okay? So we'll look at it all, folks. We'll look at it all. And as always, if there's any queries or questions, feel free to ask away in the chat. I like the green sideburns. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions or any queries. I'm more than happy to stop and kind of go over anything that anyone's curious about. I'm just going to bring up another reference image here so I can get the snout the right depth, or the right width, should I say. And I will, as always, folks, I will try to keep you informed about what it is I'm thinking as I'm creating the character. So the bridge of the nose is obviously going to flow up onto the top of the head, but part of the side of the snout is going to flow up the edge here and go over onto the brow and in the eye, and I want to make sure I try and capture that where possible. Okay, once I'm more or less happy with one part, I will move on to the next. So again, we're going to go into the brush menu, IMM primitive, polysphere. I'm going to draw out a nose. If that's in the right place, it's not quite in the right place, that's all right, we'll try again. There we go. If you tap shift as well, ZBrush should put it more or less in the middle, and you can see here now I can reshape the nose. Try putting on symmetry, that would help, wouldn't it? I'm going to show you a little trick as well in a second. You can see here that we've actually broken our symmetry line, but that's all right. We can fix that. So I'm going to essentially deselect everything, make sure I don't have my perspective on, and I'm going to try a mirror and weld. And there we go. So mirror and weld seems to have more or less fixed it. Again, I'm not overly bothered about topology at this stage. I'm not thinking about that in topological means, if you will. Can't think of the word. But I'm only thinking about the shape. That's what I'm thinking about here. I'm trying to recreate the shape. And one of the great things about doing it this way as well is that it makes a new polygroup for every shape that you add in. So it makes it a lot easier to deselect, mask, and then work on an area in isolation than it might otherwise be with something like Dynamesh or a Z-sphere. Okay, so one of the things I'd like to do here is this section for the back of the head. I kind of need a bit more resolution. So I'm first going to start changing the shape a little bit. Just a bit. And I do actually have an image of a skull, so I'm going to try and replicate the back of the cranium here a little bit. They've got great skulls as well. Most animals do. It's very fascinating to kind of compare the skull of the animal to the actual real thing. Hippopotamus is one of the best for that because it doesn't look anything like what you would imagine it to look like. So if you've never seen a hippopotamus skull before, I recommend that you check them out. So one of the things here is that I need to create my eye socket, but I'm missing some geometry. So even though this model, if I unmask it, is all combined because we're inserting meshes together, okay? It's similar to if you were to take two separate meshes in Blender or Maya and combine them into one. They're still separate, as in they're their own unique mesh, but they're combined into one. So if I isolate my head mesh, mask it, and then invert that mask, I can actually go over to the subtool here and hit divide. And Zbrush will only add subdivisions to that mesh. I can use the smooth brush to smooth out the forms a bit. And then I can start pulling in those different shapes to where the socket would be. And I'm just going to indicate actually where the skull, where the zygomatic would be. This is going to be helpful to me. There we go. I'm not trying to recreate the skull, I'm just trying to kind of roughly indicate where that part would be. And this is again because we're using individual meshes to block out the shape of the face, or the skull, sorry, should I say. What I can do is if I invert that, I can now grab the rest of the snout area here and bring that further in, and that'll fill in this area around the brow. Bring it back. Again, it'd be helpful if I could show you the skull, but if you do a search for Bintourong skull, if you're interested, you'll probably find the same image I did. And of course, there would be nothing stopping you from subdividing everything at one point, but I generally like to only subdivide when I really need to. And I apologise, folks, I don't actually have any background music, so I forgot to get that set up. I've been very busy dealing with banks and emails and kind of new email accounts and trying to fix my website this past week. So, okay. So we now need to take a little bit of a look at the snout here, because our snout's a little bit large, so it needs to be a bit thinner. So I'm just going to pull this up, bring the whole thing up a little bit. There we go. Didn't even notice. Yeah, I talk too much, folks. Anyone who watches my personal stream will be aware of that, and also anyone who's ever been taught by me. All right. So it looks really rough at the moment, but we are getting somewhere. So next thing we're going to do, now I do know that there is a macro for just appending eyeballs inside of ZBrush, but I'm just going to put in some standard spheres just as a replacement here. So I'm going to append a sphere, and you can leave the sphere as it is if you want, for the actual topology, or if you really wanted to, you could create a Q sphere, but it really doesn't matter that much because again, it's just going to be a proxy. But sometimes I feel when I say it's going to be a proxy, it's kind of like that whole a temporary solution ends up being a permanent solution type thing. So I'm going to pop the eyeball in there. I'm going to turn off the wireframe. Might get the size wrong, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So with that selected, I'm going to go up to my mirror here. Now, I have this mirror option on my custom shelf at the top. If you want to access it, you want to go into Z plugin, Subtool Master, Mirror, and that's going to give you these options. So for this eyeball, I want it to be one subtool. So just do that, and there we go. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start adding in some areas for the brows and for the actual eyelids. So we probably need to open up the socket a bit more, like that. And that's something you'll find with animals, is that they don't have a kind of fully enclosed socket like we do as humans. So some animals don't really have that, and that's why you'll sometimes get a bit of a weird shaped skulls, or some weird shaped animals with really large eyes. So I'm just trying to replicate that a little bit, and then we'll pop in the rest of the geometry. So we can do this a couple of ways. We can either use the insert mesh brush, or we could use the curve tube brush. For the curve tube brush, let's see as if it's going to work. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's use our insert mesh brush instead. Again, polysphere, drag that out, and I'm going to start shaping that around. And there's loads of ways you could do this. I tend not to do it in a really clean way. You could duplicate the eyeball and then just reshape it around it, but I like to work in a sketchy fashion. It's just how I like to work. I'm going to turn my wireframe back on here. So get this top lid in first. I disagree that it's too much. My talking, yes. I'm not sure what the delay is, folks, as well, for you guys. I hope everything's coming through okay, stream-wise. So old Benji here, which is I think what we're going to go with. I quite like that. That was a... who was it that mentioned that? That was Jimbo2 that mentioned Benji. I like that. So we're going to take Benji here. I'm just now going to grab my insert mesh brush again, and I'm going to draw out one more sphere. Do I use a sphere? Or do we want to see if we can... You know what? Let's see if we can use the insert mesh... not insert mesh, the curve tube brush here. So I'm going to reduce the size of my brush. And then I'm going to just make sure that I have closest Z set on here. You can try it with continuous Z, it might work, but that works as well. We'll use continuous Z. So I'm simply going to sculpt and draw a curve around the eye here. And then I'm going to hold down Alt and tap on my mesh. So now I can go in with my move brush and I can start moving this eyelid into place. And that gives me a better idea now of how accurate I've been with the overall shaping, which at the moment is not, well, it's not bad. It's not bad. Got Got a bit of extra work to do here, but try and get the eyelid into the right position. Probably going to have a little bit of proportional stuff to do as well. But something I would always recommend is that don't worry too much about getting the proportions spot on at the beginning. Again, it's another reason why I work at the resolutions I do, is it allows me to make these changes kind of late on. And I'm not sure if you guys are starting to see it, but I'm starting to see this animal come together. Grab that. Now, let's see. We need to move the eyes in a bit. Maybe make them a bit smaller. There we go. That's better. Benji just got a lot older and a lot more tired. Yeah, I might be putting a little bit too much of myself into this one. Not you doing eyelids like a heathen. Yep. I do. Another thing, folks, that I tend to do is I like to try out doing things in different ways almost every time I model. If I'm not doing a professional job and it's personal work, I'd like to try things out. Which is a little bit, it's very hypocritical of me, because at the beginning of the stream I mentioned that it's a good idea to have a consistent workflow so that you can work quickly, but you also need to experiment as well. You've got to kind of play around with things. It's the only way you find new ways of doing stuff and maybe faster ways of doing things. So, and right now, I mean, I'm just going for shape right now. Okay. This nose needs to be a lot wider, but not disappear. There we go. There we go. So they do have very interesting noses. I'm not going to lie. There we go. Okay. What? Yeah. Grab the poly tool. And I'm actually going to take my mask lasso here. And we're just going to mask off the top of each eyelid so that I can start pulling all this down. Like so. Move that back into the head. So again, there's no need to create your creatures in this way. But the reason I like to show different approaches is that everybody understands form in a different way. And some people, it makes more sense to just grab something like this and sculpt directly what they see and sculpt all these forms. But for others, breaking it down into what we have here might be more useful. And that's something that I think is important to kind of bear in mind. So we're just going to do that as well. Again, notice that I'm like, right, I've got something that's kind of close to what I want, and then I can work it in to the shape I need. Don't be overly precious about stuff, folks. There's no need to be precious about it at this point. And working this way is great because it allows you to have a nice visual, it gives you a better visual, I think, sometimes, of layering up the different forms. So, for example, if we zoom in here onto this image, so already on this we've got our snout, we've got our upper and lower lid, and then we've got the form going over the brow, which is this part here, and all of those are on different layers. Okay, different layers that we can work up and approach in whichever way we want. Okay. And like I said, you might be one of those people that this approach is better for you, and that's totally fine. And I also tend to do my, with the eyelids, I'll try and keep them a little bit thicker as well. That's how I tend to go. Keep the eyelid a bit thicker. Creates a better purchase sometimes in the socket. And occasionally I'll do them cleaner than this, sometimes. There we go. Let's bring that up, flatten this out a bit. And I'm also going to pull up this bit here. Actually, you know what? Let's not pull that up. Let's actually just add more form. Let's add another layer in here. And we'll use the curved tube brush again. And I'm just going to, from this bit here, I'm going to smooth this back. And then I'm going to take my curved tube brush. Again, no setting changes. I'm just going to change the brush until I'm happy with the shape I'm making. Under the lid. Under the lid. Or the lower lid. Let's smooth this back as well. There we go. I won't tell anyone if you won't. There we go. So now I can start pushing this form back in. And think about it like this. It's another way of kind of building up the anatomy. You know, and again, it's why studying anatomy is important. Because you can actually lay out where all the musculature goes on the face. You can combine different muscles together. You can lay them all out individually if you wanted. It's entirely up to yourself how you approach this. This is looking good already. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I'm going to grab the back of the head here, and I'm going to bring my character's skull back up. Right. So we're going to hide this head because we don't really need it anymore. I'm hoping that everyone's kind of picked up what we're putting down. All right, folks. So we're kind of getting round to, we're at 5:15. So I just want to indicate where the jaw is. Jaws are going to be about here, like that. There we go. So I'm going to do another sum up of what it is we're working on for anyone new that's joined the stream. Yeah, that looks okay. Right, folks, so we are continuing with our A to Z series in Zbrush here at Firestorm Studios. For those of you who don't know, my name is Pat, and I have been sculpting and working in the CG industry now for 18 years. It's been a long time. And I specialise in characters and creatures, and the whole goal of this series is to introduce people to, hopefully, kind of fun, exciting creatures, both real and mythical, from folklore, cryptids, that type of thing, as we work our way through the alphabet, and hopefully look at different methodologies for creating these creatures. Some of them will be similar, some of them you maybe have never thought of before, and the ultimate goal is just for everyone to kind of have a bit of fun, and to also show that we don't need to make a finished piece of artwork every single time. And in fact, I would recommend kind of approaching your work in a very, very kind of loose, sketchy way for this type of stuff. You will learn a lot more, and you'll get through a lot more work. And it helps practice, and kind of helps you learn not to be precious over your models. Okay, so, and that's not to say that you can't do, obviously, super finished, high detailed stuff. It's just that the way you get better at sculpting is doing it more. And what will make you a more versatile artist is if you're able to kind of adapt yourself to almost any creature. So I say that I specialize in characters and creatures, but the honest answer is that that's what I enjoy doing. But if a client came to me and said, "Can you make me a bottle of beer?" Sure, I can do that. Can you model me a tea strainer? Yeah, I can do that. That's what you want to be able to get to. You want to get your confidence to a level that when a client comes to you and says, "Can you model me this?" Yes, I can. I can create what you need me to make. And that's kind of how I've always approached my work. You know, yes, you get people who are obviously specialists in this type of stuff, but I like to be the type of artist that a client can just say, right, whatever we've got, or if there's a change, or if, say for example, for whatever reason, they go, right, we've got a Bearcat. That's what it's going to look like. This is what's in the show. And then all of a sudden, it's not a Bearcat anymore. It's a kettle or a teapot. So you have to kind of switch gears and then work on it in that regard. Okay, so there you go, folks. A little bit of a ramble, but let's take a look at where we started this evening. So, similar to our aardvark, we started with Z-spheres, everyone's favorite. Okay, we start with Z-spheres. We made something that, let's be honest, kind of looks like a monkey, and from there, we turn it into an adaptive skin, and we start to apply the primary forms, the primary shapes, the main volumes of the character. And then we've stopped there with the overall body, and we're now focusing specifically on blocking out our character's head in a different way than we have in the past. And this is a more kind of anatomical breakdown of how the character would be made, but it can be very useful depending on how you learn and how you interpret form. Okay, so this is just to give everyone just a different approach rather than just jumping in and sculpting from scratch. All right, so with that in mind, let's get going. And my tea is cold, everyone. Absolutely terrible. Okay, let's save and keep going here. The next thing I want to do is I need to give my character a bit of a neck. So I'm going to go back into my IMM primitives here. And I've got two choices. I can use the insert cylinder, or I can even use the capsule. And I think I'm going to use the capsule for this. So turn off dynamic perspective, go to the back of the character, and just draw out the capsule. I'm going to rotate that. Turn off symmetry. Let's just center it as well. There we go. And I'm going to bring back the poly version here. I'm going to turn on transparency. And I'm going to use this as my guide for the character's neck. Again, don't make your life unnecessarily difficult having to recreate things if you don't want to. For example, if we go back to our aardvark from last week, there would be nothing stopping me from actually just chopping the head off this aardvark, using the body, and then chopping his feet off, and then using the body and readapting and adjusting that into that of the Bearcat. Okay, so wherever you can, if you can, kit bash your models. Reuse stuff. Don't reinvent the wheel every time if you don't have to. So I'll take the, there we go. And something else that I would always recommend people do is if you're getting into, well, actually, there we go, folks. Does anybody have any queries or questions about characters, the industry, creatures, the meaning of life? So all I'm doing here, taking that capsule size and then just readjusting the shape here, just trying to match our underlying mesh. There we go. So we'll take it to about there. Oh, ZBrush has been a bit funny because of the transparency. That's all right. So you can see here we've actually changed the orientation of the head a little bit, but that's okay. The Bintourong has a lot of fur. Has a lot of fur, so we have to keep that in mind too. So I'm just going to try and... What's this? Okay. What's this? Oh, what got you into 3D to start with, and what would you do differently this time if you could start your career again? Oh, that is a good question. Hot damn. All right. So, well, the first part, what got me into 3D? Okay. So, a couple of things got me into 3D. Primarily, it was two films when I was growing up. One of them was Jurassic Park, and the second was Toy Story. I've always been an art-based person. I've always been interested in art, and I originally aspired to be a comic book artist. That was originally what I wanted to be. But yes, Jurassic Park, I saw that when I was... age was I? 8 years old, in the cinema. I saw Jurassic Park, and it made me realise that... And what that actually wanted me to do, that was what made me want to work in the movies. I didn't necessarily know I wanted to work in VFX or anything like that. I just wanted to work in the movies because I thought it was really cool. So Jurassic Park's what got me there. And then when Toy Story came out, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. I really like that. And that kind of pushed me towards animation. Now, the thing is that was kind of like a pipe dream for me when I was a kid. I thought, oh, that's what I'd like to do, but I think reality kind of started to set in a little bit, and I kind of thought about doing other things when I was at high school and all this kind of stuff, but I still went to university to learn animation because I still had that kind of goal. What got me into VFX was another film. It was actually the breakdown of the visual effects that I saw for the film Underworld. And that is what made me want to get into visual effects. That's when I went, that's what I want to do. So that's kind of how I got... That's a very brief way of how I got into 3D, really. Because it used to just be a hobby of mine. I first started 3D when I was 14. And I always knew it was something I wanted to do with my career, but never thought it would actually happen. So, now as for the second part, what would I do differently? Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. Because I truly believe that everything I've done in my life is what's led me up to this point. Good and bad choices. So I wouldn't change a damn thing. So, because it's one of those things, like, for example, right, I'll give you, this is a good example of why I came to this kind of conclusion, if you will, is that when I first started in the industry, I stayed in Scotland and I became a freelancer, and I did try to get work in London, but I wasn't successful, and I ended up getting work at a local studio. And then, unfortunately, in 2008, the there was a global recession, which meant there was very little work for freelancers and such. And if you weren't in London or one of the big kind of hubs for work, it was really hard. It was really hard for people working in London as well, obviously. And that's when I got into teaching. And I went into teaching as a essentially as a kind of I need a job, and I was offered the job to teach a Maya class at the university I studied at, and I jumped at it because I had just been let go from the job I was working at. So the way I think about it is that if I had chosen to go down to London as a runner, or gotten a job in London as a runner, then I wouldn't have been in a position where I had no job because of the recession, which wouldn't have got me into teaching, which means I wouldn't have met the hundreds and hundreds of people that I have through teaching CG, and I wouldn't have realized and come to the conclusion that the teaching of 3D and helping others kind of achieve their kind of goals, I wouldn't have realized that is what I get the most, that's what gives me most purpose in what it is I do. So no, I mean, you can call it fate or whatever you want, but no, I wouldn't change a damn thing. My life is what it needs to be because of the choices I've made. So what I would say to that, folks, is do not regret the choices you make. You make them for a reason. Even if they turn out bad or the decision you make ends up being bad, you made it for a reason. It's putting you down the path that you're supposed to be taking. That's my take on it. So hopefully that answers your questions. So yeah, happy to do any follow-ups as well, folks. Yeah. So right now I'll focus on the Bearcat again. Let's give him some ears. So into the IMM brush. Polysphere again, good old polysphere. And we'll drag out. See, instantly, as soon as I've done that, it looks like it looks like an animal again. So we'll take this and we'll scale it down. We'll scale down our sphere, and now we can start getting that into the right position. And I really wish I could show you some of the images I've got, folks, but there's some absolutely fantastic images of these creatures. So let's put that into there. Let's scale that out. Oh no, so there we go. Then we're going to start shaping this out again. So as I said, I was hoping that we could maybe get this guy done in the time. I don't think we're going to though, folks. We've only got we might stay on for a bit longer. We might sculpt for a bit longer tonight. Because we've stopped to answer a few questions. Which is all good. Always happy to answer questions, folks. If you can even understand me, that is. I apologise to anyone who's watching that doesn't, my accent's maybe a bit thick. Alright, let's see. That looks a bit high up. But one of the things, again, is that, I said this the last time as well regarding references, lots of references not always your friend. Pick one or two solid pieces of reference that are similar so that you don't end up constantly changing it, because every animal is going to be unique. Same as humans, you know, the ears are roughly in the same place, but they're all going to be, you know, varying sizes, might not be exactly in the right same location, that type of thing. So, all right, how does that look? It's getting there. We are going to need the tufts soon to keep the look of this. I think it's a bit, no, wrong size. There we go. Wrong orientation. There we go. That's better. I love your accent. Thank you. Thank you. Alrighty. let's get the inflate brush out and start. That's working a little bit better. This is another thing as well, folks. I constantly talk to myself when I work. It's one of the things that kind of concerned me about doing streaming, because I'm thinking people are just think I'm mad. He's talking to himself again, but I don't care. I've decided I don't care, so I just go with it. All right, let's take another look. We have essentially lost a lot of form and volume under the chin, and that was just to help me with where the zygomatic is going to go, so the cheekbone. So that's something we have to be wary of. Let's just, and again, just want to point it out, notice that we're still working really low, but we can start to see that this is looking like the thing it looks like. And that's a very old Simpsons reference. It's a very old Simpsons reference. Your paintings look like the things they look like. So let's turn that off. There we go. That's what we want. Let's get the dynamic. Oh, I should point out what I did there, folks. Sorry. Let me redo that and I'll show you the problem I had. So as I'm trying to scale this, you'll notice that it's not really scaling how I want. And that's just to do with how Zbrush is kind of interpreting the symmetry. So I have to go over into my tool palette here and turn on the local symmetry, and then that's going to allow me to move things and scale them properly. And by default, dynamic will be on, which is going to do this. So you'll see as I scale it, it only does one side. So you have to turn that off so that you can scale everything properly as you need it to. Now, I need a good side shot of him. We've got one there. For this, that's a good one. That'll do. Ah, I appear to. I always find it funny when you first lay down a form and it looks absolutely strange until you actually start working it into the rest of the model and into the rest of the character. What's this? I don't know if you can answer this for free, but I'm looking to start pushing my understanding of form. Been using base meshes and offhand anatomy knowledge. Is there a way to practice anatomy without feeling like my brain is falling out? Ah, okay. That's a very good question. So, the fact that you've how I'm trying to think of the best, less rambly way to answer this. It's one of the things I envy a lot of other creators online for. They seem to be way better at answering in a clear way. My brain runs really fast all the time, so let me have a wee think though. So anatomy is incredibly complex, and you can make it as simple or as complex as you want to. That's what I would say. Approach it in a way that's manageable for you. So, for example, start with the skeletal structure, okay? Learn where all the main landmarks of the skeleton actually are. You don't have to worry about every part of the skeleton straight off the bat. That's what I would say. You don't have to worry about every part of anatomy all the time. You want to learn the important parts, the parts that are going to affect the form and the shape and the function of your character, okay, or your creature. So, say for example, let's see here. Let's take this image here, okay. When I look at this creature here, if I think about this is why I'm saying start with the skeleton, because that's what you want to start with first. Think about what is the skeleton showing me directly. Obviously, the skeleton has the full structure of the head, right? But as we've already discussed, the skull is going to look a lot different from the actual creature itself. because you've got flesh, you've got fatty tissue, you've got um, a musculature, all this kind of stuff on top of that. So, with that in mind, start with a skeleton, figure out what main areas, so let's say the brow, the top of the snout, there's going to be very little flesh there, so that's a very strong bony landmark. Same as the kind of forehead and the brow to a certain extent, okay? And probably under here as the for the kind of cheekbone, okay? And you can do this yourself as well. You can actually, if you were to kind of take, if you take your hand and and kind of, feel along, the bony parts of your face, you can figure out where all the landmarks are. And this is well documented as well in anatomy books, right? And sculptural studies. So starting with the skeleton, figure out where all that is and understand that. That's the thing. Understand it, learn it. Then work your way up to the main muscles. Again, you want all the muscles, you want to learn the shape of the muscle first. That's my advice. Don't worry about the name, not off the bat. Worry about what shape it makes on your creature. What form does it create? Where does it insert? Where does it start from? These are important things because, again, they influence the overall form and shape of your character or your creature. Okay? But don't stop at the skeleton and the muscle. And I think that's what a lot of people make the mistake. Okay? You then have to learn about fatty tissues, because everybody has fatty tissue, every animal has fatty tissue, and otherwise everybody would just look like a skeleton with muscles on it, like an écorché, right? We need to add fatty tissue, and then you have to take into account skin, the thickness of the skin, all these type of things. So do it in stages, right? And when it comes to practicing the anatomy, that's what I would do. I would start with a skeleton, and then I would use anatomy textbooks, anatomy models. If you can get your hands on a scan of a human, I would use that. Okay. Don't rely on somebody else's model. If you can get a scan of a human body to practice from, that's what I would do. Somewhere like 3D Scan Store, they're a great resource for it. They're a great resource for posed characters that have been scanned, and that is how you'll get a really good insight into proper anatomy using those. Okay. And something I saw recently, and I really agree with this, there's pretty much one of the masters, Ryan Kingsling. He has been showcasing that you can take a scan, and then you can take a skeleton that you find online or in Zbrush, and then try to match the pose of the skeleton into the scan and learn anatomy that way. So that's a really good way. And to be fair, if you are looking to learn anatomy, check out Ryan Kingsling. You won't be disappointed. So I don't know if that answers your question. Again, I know it was very rambly. My apologies. But that's how I would approach it. You've got to break it down. If it's because it's so complex, you have to break it down into the parts that you understand. And the way I've done it, and the way I did it was I did it that way. I learned the skeleton, and then I learned the muscles, then I learned all the fatty tissue, etc. That type of stuff. Okay. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself like a great anatomist or anything like that. I know what I need to know for my purposes. Okay. But I still have to look up. That probably wasn't the best answer. My apologies. That probably wasn't the most clear answer, but hopefully it gives you something to work from. But I am part of the Discord for the Firestorm, so feel free to ask me a question in there as well if you wanted a follow-up question answer. Okay. So, where are we at? We're at 22. Okay, let me just have a look at the reference here. Okay. So what I'm now going to start doing is I'm going to start reshaping the whole character and just start readjusting the proportions a bit now that I've got these forms in place. But yes, I mean, anatomy is and the other, to be honest, the only other way really is to study anatomy. And what I mean by that is to study and sculpt it. And one of the best things that I ever did was I tried to recreate Michelangelo's David. I know it's such a cliche, but if you practice trying to recreate one of the masters' sculptures, you will learn a lot about anatomy. Okay, so that's another really good way of doing it. And then as you progress and you start to kind of understand the shape and the form of anatomy more, then you can start learning the names of all the muscles, or the less important ones, and that type of thing. Because you can always have a textbook or a reference next to you for the names if you needed to indicate them to someone. All right, let's have a look at our... Okay, what we're going to do here is just turn on our transparency. And I think what we'll do here is I'm going to take the head. I'm not going to go into transpose for this or anything, but I am just going to change the rotation, the orientation. No, I do need to go into transpose because I have eyeballs. So we're going to go into transpose here, folks. And I'm just going to... It's not going to let me, so I'm going to have to... It's going to be difficult. Dang. ZBrush is just being a pain. Right, mask that out, invert it, grab our rotate tool. Oh, that's why ZBrush is being difficult. Right, hold on, folks, sorry. Oh, don't you dare crash. There we go. That never works, by the way, folks. If if you think ZBrush is about to crash, it probably will. That's why you should save way more than I do. What's this? How did you find balance between studying, recreating anatomical reference, and doing your own work? Because it feels like one can take over the other if you're not careful. Okay, I'm going to give you a completely honest answer here. I didn't. I had no balance when I was studying and learning. I barely slept when I was at university, and I just worked myself. I overworked myself to learn as much as I possibly could, and I wouldn't recommend it. So, no, being completely honest, that was how I did it. I didn't actually have a balance when I was first studying it. I didn't really learn to be to kind of have a good like work-life balance and balance between my projects until after I joined the industry, I'm afraid. I know how important it is now, but it's not something that I can say that I was really great at when I was first starting out, because the honest answer is I wasn't. And yeah. Wait a minute. Sorry, folks, that something's disappeared. There we go. But you're right. You can find balance to study and recreate. However, what I have learned since then is that the only way to stop yourself from kind of burning out or kind of overworking yourself is to schedule everything. And sadly, that sometimes means if you're studying, you have to schedule in your own time as well. So when it comes to, you know, your studies, so say for example you're at university, you have all your project work. Well, if your day is, say 9 till 4 or 10 to 4 at university, then you can schedule a couple of hours in the morning to do anatomy, and you don't have to do a lot. That's the key thing. This is the thing that I think people kind of get confused about. You don't need to spend a lot of time every day doing something. The important thing is that you do spend some time. So if your day starts at 10 o'clock, right, get up at 8, sort yourself out, breakfast, solid breakfast, get yourself sorted, and then from 9 until 9:30, you study anatomy. And actually by giving yourself a short amount of time to work on something, similar to what we're doing here on these streams, you focus yourself, or you force yourself not to be precious over things. And then it will eventually, it will not look great to begin with. Your work will be rubbish, or it'll be really hard to do, but the more you do it, the better you will become, the faster you will become, and the less precious over your work you will become. And what that essentially is doing is it's building confidence in yourself. It's building confidence in your own skill set. Because instead of going, oh, that doesn't look great, oh, I don't like how I've done that, you go, that's fine, I know I can fix it later on, but I've got the general form working, I've got that working. So you don't need to spend hours every day on anatomy. You can spend half an hour. And if you do half an hour every day of anatomy, then that's 2.5 hours that you've spent a week doing anatomy. And you can do that with other things as well. So that's the thing. You don't need to do a lot of it. You just need to be consistent with it. Okay? And I know that sounds really cliched, maybe, but that is the honest answer. Consistency trumps hours and hours of time. And when it comes to all-nighters, speaking from experience, they're not worth it. I have found that anytime I've done an all-nighter, the work always has to be fixed later on. Whereas if you go home at the end of the day at a proper time, get some actual rest, and then maybe go in early the next day, you will get a lot more done, and it will be better, and it will not need to be fixed as much. So hopefully that answers your question, Tiramisu. You're welcome. This is one of the benefits of, I guess. Sorry if you expected more light-hearted questions. No, not at all. Hard questions are good. That's the thing. That's the thing, folks. Don't shy away. If I can answer it, I'll answer it. I might just not have a great answer, but I will answer it if I can. Okay. Yeah. Alrighty, folks. I think we're kind of getting somewhere. Right, let's T-pose, sub-T. And what time are we on, folks? Okay, we're 10 to 6. Yeah, we can sculpt for a bit longer, I think, and answer a few more questions if anyone has them. So what I'll do here is I'm going to delete these heads again. I don't need these now. Get rid of the heads. But I am going to duplicate the body again, and this time I'm going to delete the actual head section of it, like so. And once that's done, I'll just do a delete hidden. Okay, so I need to step down a subdivision, delete hidden. No, I don't want that. So I'm going to delete my lowest subdiv, and then we'll delete everything. Delete hidden. Okay, now we'll turn on our character head again. And wait a minute. Is it that one there? There we go. Okay, So the reason I've done this is I want to take a look at the scale. So I've made the scale of my character a little bit small. So that's fine. We can fix that. We're just going to grab them and scale them all together. Now we can either go into T-pose, the kind of T-pose master, or transpose master, sorry, or what we can also do is we can make a folder. So if we make a folder, just call it head, and we pop the head and the eye in there. What I can do here in the options is I can select transpose set. And what that will give me the option of is you'll notice that the pizza boxes on the right hand side, they're all selected. All right. And that's going to allow me to move the head and anything in that group and scale it at the same time, like so. So there we go. And that's just going to, it saves me having to go into the transpose master. There we go. Maybe that a little bit smaller. There we go. How's that looking? Let's get into the perspective mode and get some reference up. Let's see how we're doing. Yeah, that's about the right size. So we'll turn off the pizza box there. And now, if I move it, now I'll be able to move it separately, but before I could move it at the same time. And now we can start tweaking the rest of the model to get it to fit into the rest, like so. Okay. 35 people. Oof, we've lost 20. I think my rambling might have put people off. So that's a hell of a drop. Oh no, what's happened to the head? That's not good. Okay. Oh, damn it. Okay, looks like with that transpose set, I've inadvertently broken something, so we're gonna see here. Go. Right, okay, looks like we're gonna have to do the transpose, I'm afraid, folks, because that I broke something catastrophically. So they're lost. Thanks, Cece. Thank you. Right, let's try this again, shall we, folks? Okay. Scale up the head. Scale up the head. There we go. Without breaking everything this time, ideally. That head's too big, so that looks about right to me. Okay, back to T-pose sub-T. We'll just check it against, yeah. That looks okay to me. Okay, we'll try that again, folks. Let's get the body now. Let's tweak this, get the neck to the right width, because they do have quite thick necks. It's one of those really interesting shapes, actually, is that their head kind of just from the shoulders just tapers down to a point. Really interesting shaped animal. We're going to need some new eyeballs, actually, folks. Those ones look a little bit dodgy. All right, let's get some new eyes in here. Then we can maybe, yeah, we could probably make a start on the feet. I think we can make a start on the feet. So we haven't done as much as we did with our aardvark, but that's okay, because we're answering questions as we go, folks, and that's the whole point of this stream. Better. Right, let's get that mirrored across. Merge into one. Perfect. Time for another save, and I think we're going to have to change up our material as well, because ZBrush's contrast is starting to kind of make it a little bit hard to see. So let's go back to projects, back into my custom, and I'll go into collections. That one might be okay. Do another save. Okay, so now that we've got the kind of head blocked out, we're going to do the same with our feet. So I'm just going to bring up, it's really kind of handy actually, I got some really, there's actually a great photo of a bearcat with its foot up against a glass partition, so it gives you a really clear indication of what their feet look like, and that's going to make life a lot easier. So, ignoring what we have here, we're going to start afresh, and again, we're going to be using the primitive blockout method here. So I'm going to start with a Z-sphere, and what I think I'll do before we do that though is I'm going to save a lot of this. And maybe do a little bit of adjustment here, because I did quite like the shape that we had with these ears. So I'm going to do a little bit of this, make things match a bit closer. Don't worry about the eyes, folks. And we're going to steal the tufts from the back of this as well. We're going to steal the tufts. So we'll grab these. And let's duplicate the model. Delete hidden. There we go. We've got a couple of tufts on the back of the ears. We can put this new one into the stages folder and hide it. See, I say that, but actually I think I've done I still need the body. that would be helpful, wouldn't it? Can't really go many places without the body. There we go. Rename the folder Bearcat. Right. A little bit of housekeeping never hurt anybody. And what's this? Ah, Ko-fi page. Yeah. I actually did set myself up a Ko-fi page, or a coffee page, or Ko-fi, however you pronounce it. But not something I've ever properly used. All right, so let's create ourselves a Q sphere. I'm going to smooth it once, and I'm going to start shaping out the foot. And it's great because the foot is just this asymmetrical kind of little blob, basically. So there we go. Also, I should point out, if you're curious about this, if I hold down, I've got my gizmo here, if I hold down Control and grab a scale, it will clip from one side, in case you're curious, okay? So that gives me the overall shape. There's a bunch of little wrinkles and shapes that we need to put in here, but we'll get that in a second. I just want to work out where all the toe beans are going to go. The toe beans. So we're basically going to work our way up and around. So we're going to start with the base of the foot and then construct it from there. I have other reference for the toes themselves, but we're going to use, I think what we'll do is we'll use a Q sphere again, but we'll customize it. So append sphere. Again, folks, I am aware that there is a ability to just pop one in, but I want to show you how it's done. Okay. Right, so that's, we need to rotate this. Oh. Okay. We'll rotate the whole lot in a second. So with this new sphere, I want to make my character's toes. So we're going to go into the Z modeler brush, and I'm just going to bevel, like so. Do an auto groups. I'm going to grab this group and just bring all that down. Back into the Z modeler brush. And this time we're going to insert a new edge loop. I'm going to take this top section again and just move it up. And then I can start shaping it out. Maybe subdivide it once. There we go. So their toes are generally, they just kind of taper off. Again, they're kind of got kind of like a pine cone shape. And then the actual, if you want to call it the toe bean bit, pops out here. And then their claw, and their claws are something else. They've got some pretty vicious looking claws on them. I don't know how aggressive these animals are, but I think if they wanted to be, you'd be in trouble. Okay. So we want to kind of create a little bit of a plumpier section here, and it comes out the front. And then I'm going to add in, just to help me kind of visualize this, we're going to pop in the claw again. So for the claw, I think we'll use another, we're going to use a Q sphere. So one thing you can do is if you go up to the macros here and go under MISC, there is, or there should be anyway. Where is it? Oh, it's not there. I thought there was the ability to make a Q sphere, unless I'm just not seeing it. Oh well, not a big deal. We'll append a new sphere, turn it into a Q sphere. And I'm going to scale it down. And I'm going to shape that into a claw. So the toe bean's there, and it's quite an extensive claw, something like that. What's the best way to go about this? Ah, I see. Right, okay. Create a shape like this. And then we're going to take our Z modeler brush, insert an edge loop. We're going to take these two edges and we're going to Q mesh them out. Like so. And then just shape them into a claw. How are we doing, folks? Okay. Well, sorry, folks, we went a wee bit quiet. Just while we try and get a little bit more of this out the gate. I'm going to add in another couple of edge loops. And there we go. That's what I wanted. That's looking more like the thing. So I'll be streaming on Firestorm up until the 22nd. So we should hopefully finish off our the Bearcat before then. And then after that, I'm going to, a little bit of a spoiler, we're going to be creating a chupacabra. So we're going for a cryptid this for after the Bintourong. So you won't want to miss that one if you're a fan of creepy creatures like that. Come on, Zbrush. There we go. So once I've kind of got that rough shape in, what I'll do is I will Dynamesh, which is going to make it look kind of messy. So I want to make sure that I've got blur off, lower the Z subprojection, and I'm going to increase the resolution a bit. And then once I've done that, I'll do a mirror and weld. We'll polish it with deformation. Polish it a little bit. Give it a little bit of a shape if we need to. Like so. Doesn't have to be anything major. Then we'll do a Z remesh. Keep everything nice and clean. What we're looking at, we've got, it's 3000, so what we'll do is we'll put the target polygon count to 1. That'll make it nice and clean. Switch to half, turn off adaptive. That's quite important when you're using the half button here. Turn off adaptive because otherwise ZBrush will try to add in the extra polygons to keep the shape, whereas sometimes you just want to literally half what you've got on the screen to get it nice and low. There we go. That's pretty good. Yeah, we'll keep that one. That's fine. Again, it's not necessarily the final one, but it's good enough for our purposes, for our toe beans. So there we got our claw in place. Need to finish off the actual toes themselves, which are going to all be slightly different shapes when we get them in, when we start merging it together, but this is the basic shape. There we go. We'll actually do a little bit of sculpting, folks. I know, shock horror. That's maybe why we lost a few people. We've not really been sculpting. We've just been moving things around. Okay. Alright, folks. So, like I said, we've got about 20 minutes left. Probably going to take this up to 6:30. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them now, and I will answer as best I can. So I'm going to add a bit more plumpness to the toe here, and then I'm going to reshape. Okay. All right. That's enough, I think, of that. Now I just need to find where I put. Oh, there it is. So there's the actual toe bean itself. So we'll take the foot, or the toe even, and we'll lower it to that. Delete the higher, delete the lower, and then merge it down. Okay. There. Grab the toe, scale it down. We're going to start on this edge here. Turn off our symmetry. And that one kind of looks... Right, we'll do that with that one. It's about the right size. We're going to hold down Control, click and drag. Now, whenever you're doing this, remember that if you hold down Control and you release it, at any point, ZBrush will just keep duplicating your object, okay? Which is really helpful if you're wanting to try and create, obviously, evenly, equidistant kind of object. So I can say, right, I want it to move to here, and then if I release Control and keep moving, ZBrush will just keep repeating. But we just want the one. Brilliant. No worries, CC. Thanks very much. Enjoy your dinner. Enjoy your dinner. Thanks for coming along. I'm going to pop that there. That one into there. And then give ourselves another one. And then they've got a little dinky toe at the end. And then to finish this off, we're just going to do an insert mesh brush with our polysphere. Drag that up. And then we'll use that to fill out the top of the foot. And all we're doing here, we're just giving ourselves a good proper base to sculpt on a little bit later on. And again, you might get to this, you might think, oh, there's a way easier way I could have done that, but, why didn't you do it this way? Totally fine. You do it the way that makes most sense to you, And again, I might not always do things this way. I might have done it a completely separate way, or a different way if I wasn't kind of doing a live stream. It just depends. Now we need a, yeah, I was right. It's quite a flat foot. So their feet are quite flat until we obviously get to the joint, like so. What I did there as well is I've actually masked out an area, and then I've hit Control D, and it's actually just subdivided the area that was unmasked. And ZBrush just adds triangles wherever you need it, and that's going to allow me to then shift something up, flatten it, and do some kind of crazy stuff. So we can do that there, start smoothing things out. That gives me the shape I need. Go into geometry, Z-remesher, Z-remesh. Ah, nope, don't want that. I want, actually what I'm going to do here is I'm going to separate this out so I can Z-remesh it on its own. So we'll split unmasked, and then we'll Z-remesh it. Half that. There we go. There we go. Just another different. It's another way to approach building out your creature's parts. Now, there's a bit of reshaping that we need to do to these toes, but what I'm going to do for the time being is I'm actually just going to, well, first of all, we're going to do an auto group so that, and we're going to bring the, oops, the claw and the toe together, because I'm going to want to kind of dynamesh these together at some point. So I don't really want them really close together because it could potentially cause some problems. So we'll just do a quick adjustment to keep them all separate for the time being. Oops, there we go. And that should be enough. Yeah, that'll be all right. If we run into a problem, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Maybe this one could do with being ever so slightly rotated. Excellent. Okay. Perfect. There's our foot. Now, I think I've created a right foot there. Let me just double check. Yes, I have. So, we've got our right foot in place. Let's bring everything back before we finish up. I want to thank everyone for coming along tonight to this afternoon. I hope everyone's had a enjoyable stream. And as if there is any last minute questions that anybody has, please feel free to ask now before we finish up. We will be finishing up pretty shortly, but I just like to try and kind of, I'm going to put this into a new folder. I'm going to call it foot. This was very enjoyable. I'm glad to hear that, Tiramisu. Thank you. It's always good to hear. Because you never know when you're streaming. Sometimes it could be up people's street, sometimes it's not. And that's the risk you take, really. So, we've also went and done a bit of a crazy thing with the foot, in that it's totally in the wrong orientation. So we're going to grab the foot, we're going to do transpose set, reset our rotation, do that 90 degrees. Make sure that nothing's broken. It's not. Symmetry isn't on. And we'll just move our toe, our foot into place. And we've actually done not bad when it comes to the size of the feet, because they've actually got quite large feet, because they do a lot of climbing. So there we go. And we can clean up how that foot and how the head and everything goes into the rest of the body a little bit later. Although I can't help myself. I have a sickness. Okay. Okay, folks. Save as. All right, so we have, at the end of this evening's, it's about 2 hours, maybe just over 2 hours, we've built out our base mesh for our Bearcat. We've got all the right things, all the right parts in place. We've got our foot blocked out. We have our face blocked out in a detailed way. And we've got the kind of primary form and shape of the overall body. Now, there's going to be some changes to the whole creature as we continue. And we're going to have a little bit of a think about how we do some of the fur. We're going to have to do the tufts of the ears and the whiskers. They're they're a very prominent feature of the creature. Feature of the creature. Sorry, couldn't help myself. So that there is going to be something that we really want to get into the model, and that's just something I want to leave you with. Whenever you're doing something really like a fast model or a quick study, look at the things that really stand out for that character, for the creature, for the object. What makes it unique, or what makes it work? And in this case with the Binturongs, it's their tufts coming off the ears, it's their kind of very large, it's their large tail, and these whiskers are very, very prominent as well. They really stand out. And I think if we were to, if we were to add them, it would make it look more like the thing that we're trying to actually replicate. All right, folks. Well, as I said, thank you all very much for coming along. Remember to keep an eye out on the Firestorm socials. There will be more streams coming this week. Make sure you don't miss them. And I will be available in the Firestorm Studios Discord if you want to reach out and ask questions. All right. Until then, folks, I will see you all next week. Enjoy the rest of this week and take care. Bye for now.